Welcome everyone to Getting Started with ForeFlight for Business. In this webinar, we'll take a closer look at what it takes to set up a business or group account for your organization, and look at how ForeFlight is the all-in-one solution for business operators. Our presenters for today are very familiar with ForeFlight for Business and all that it can bring to your operation. Chris and Grady, go ahead and tell us about yourselves.
All right. Hello, everybody. Yes, my name is Chris Mauser and coming to you from South Texas. Been with ForeFlight for over 3 years now, and I'm a commercial multi-single with the type rating, and I'm also a CFI, II, and MEI with a few thousand hours of dual instruction given. And I'm really excited to present today, and this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. But before we get going, let's go ahead and introduce my colleague, Grady.
Hi, everyone. I'm Grady Hughes. I'm an enterprise account executive with the ForeFlight sales team. I've worn many hats at ForeFlight over the years, been with the company since 2016. Also a pilot, CFI and CFII, along with Chris. Quite a few hours of instruction given through the years. Happy to have that experience to go alongside the work we do here at ForeFlight, and happy to talk to customers and potential customers today about the values of the business account with ForeFlight.
Thanks, guys. On the agenda for today's webinar, we'll start by talking about the benefits of ForeFlight for Business. After that, Chris and Grady will walk through setting up a business account for the first time. Since many of you here today will likely be account administrators, we'll also show you what that initial setup looks like for pilots after you add them to your group account. And then we'll talk about integrations, keeping your department in sync with up-to-date charts and documents. And after that, Chris will walk through setting up and managing aircraft, including tips on how to get more accurate performance calculations. And then we'll look at additional services ForeFlight offers to business customers. At the end, we'll take a few questions during Q&A. With that, let's get started. Grady, I'll hand things over to you.
Welcome again, everyone. So to start us off, let's focus in on the key values of the business account so everyone can figure out if they're in the right place sooner rather than later. So a business account is going to be a ForeFlight account that aggregates a group of users, right? So we can call them a business account, multi-pilot account, an enterprise account could be used. The end user experience of using ForeFlight on the mobile can look very similar to what you'd have with an individual account, but the main values that you're going to be gaining with a business account are going to be what you're seeing on the screen. A centralized management of the account, so you can do billing and the subscription management by an admin or group of admins on behalf of a group of users to simplify things and keep them organized. That unlocks being able to be billed by invoice, for example, rather than paying by credit card in advance as you get a larger account potentially. You'll be able to manage your users, who's got a login that's getting access on the subscription that you're providing from an administrative level. You can centrally manage documents and fleet aircraft that are accessible to those users that log into your account, so you can keep everything standardized and organized as you manage the needs for a group of ForeFlight users. You'll also want this type of account for access to our advanced features in Dispatch. You can also leverage Fuel Advisor with an account that has Dispatch as well, and the business account is a core prerequisite for that. Also, you get advanced support. One, an account executive, someone from the sales team, will have your account catering to you for transactional needs, questions about setup, account growth, talking about discounts as you're scaling and growing. And then you'll also have the success team to support you with onboarding, training, getting a group of users that may not be that familiar with ForeFlight as an EFB. We have resources to help train them and make sure everyone is using the system efficiently, being from planners, admins, and end users in the cockpit.
I love all these value propositions for a business account. This, like I said earlier in the introduction, this is the bread and butter of what success does. And before we really get down into all the exact details, I just wanted to take a minute to let everyone know that's joining today. We're going to be going over a lot of different parts of a business account, right? So I don't want this to seem overwhelming. I don't want everyone to think that they have to learn everything there is to know, just on the first day. Rome was not built in a day, we like to say. So I just want to set the expectation that, this is a high level overview of a new pilot, multi-pilot account for ForeFlight. And anything we talk about today, I'm 99.9% sure that there is a corresponding webinar and or video or in our pilot's guide to explain more about any of these subjects. So don't get overwhelmed. Also, that is exactly what success does. As Grady mentioned earlier, we are here to help you get onboarded. We're here to give you the resources to set you up for success, and then to help you with your journey along with ForeFlight, and to make sure that you have everything you need to be successful, to be happy with ForeFlight, to make sure that everything you are missing, that we're there to get that built for you. So ForeFlight is here for the entire life cycle, to make sure that you have someone as an advocate for you, make sure you were able to use ForeFlight to the best of its ability.
Thanks, Chris. And let's jump over to logging into the ForeFlight account. As Chris mentioned, we're going to be covering the key components of a business account, and that starts from the administrative perspective on the web. So we're here at plan.foreflight.com, and I'm going to be logging in as a business account admin who is at the beginning phases of setting up an account. This part of the workflow, getting the account, making the purchase, setting up licensing, you'll be working alongside your account executive at this point. When you get logged in, we're going to be landing at various pages depending on how you had the account set up originally. Dispatch is going to be the home page for those who have a dispatch license. Maps or flights may be the home page depending on your admin privileges or not. But the place that we really want to start today as we look at setting the foundation for our business account is going to be organization. So on the left-hand column, this is going to be our nav bar. Organization's near the bottom. When we click on that, we're going to have visibility of quite a few things that are going to be an important part of the account setup. First, in the top left, we've got our organizational name. This account is called ForeFlight Flight Ops. Across from that, in the top right, we're going to see our licensing total and how many users are on the account. So to break this data set down, out of total users, we have 2, which you can see down here is Chris and myself. We have space for 10, which is what I would have purchased as the owner of this account. So I have room to add 8 more users at this point. Chris and I are going to be the initial admins that we've worked with the account executive to set up access to really start building this account out for our team and our needs. We have 2 iPads logged in so far, and as we add more users and they start logging in on mobile devices, we'll see these numbers grow. Just for quick reference, to get a more granular view of what's going on, we're going to see user details down here, but we want to start by being able to add them to the team. You'll see this blue button here that denotes adding a user. If I click there, that's where I can start adding the other users that are coming alongside Chris and I on this account. You can very easily add users by typing in multiple email addresses in this view, right? Typing in, and then click add. You can also do a bulk add by CSV. So if you build a file out, and these instructions here detail how the title headers need to be noted to be able to import successfully, but you could do bulk imports via this CSV method as well. Again, the initial users and the initial account setup to get to this point will be handled with your account executive as you go through the purchase process. So reach out to them with any questions if you have any confusion up to this point. As we start adding users, we're going to be able to look at the users we add as well as details to manage a team. So looking down here in the granular view, we've got the usernames that we add, which are going to be the email addresses in use for login across the team. You'll be able to have user names. You'll reference the date they were added to the team, what devices they have in use, and then a compliance view where we can see the status of the data and documents on the devices that those users have logged into. To dive into that a little deeper, because this is an ideal piece for 135 compliance, when an inspector may ask you, how do you know your devices are up to date? How do you know you have documents that you're distributing through this EFB being downloaded by the end user? ForeFlight can offer a lot of insight into that. How we would view it, noting that here Chris has some sort of nav data on his mobile device that's expired, we can go to a more granular view by clicking on Chris as a user. In the top section of this view is where we can edit any details for one of our users on the account. If I hit edit in the right hand corner, I can update names, email addresses, reference points like phone number and crew code, help with resetting a password here, and then toggle on or off admin rights for those who may need them. Admins on the account are going to be able to manage these steps that we're looking at today by adding and editing users. They'll also be able to do things like managing the fleet as well as looking at billing history. Once you finish changes, you can hit update, and this top section will reflect the changes that have been made. The next section is going to be the devices that are specific to Chris's login. So we can see Chris has an iPad Pro that's logged in. The model is an iPad. What iOS version is on that iPad. The check-in column is the last time the ForeFlight app was logged into on that device. This is the version of the ForeFlight app. Green meaning it's the latest version, red meaning it's behind. And then we see data and documents. So this account that we're showing you today has a documents distribution set up that Chris is going to cover in more detail here shortly. And we can see that Chris has downloaded the company documents on that device. Wanting to see what might be expired on Chris's device, I can click on the expired text and get a quick look at what is current versus what is not. So we see mostly Air Million and DFS European VFR charts are expired on Chris's device. If I go up, I can also see what he has that's current, right? And so if I was a DO in this situation and Chris has a flight that's going outbound, but it's domestic US, I may not be that concerned, but I could prompt him that, hey, it's time for you to do some updates on the iPad. Fortunately, on the iPad, he'll be prompted as well. There will be a red notification bubble pointing him to the download section to get anything that's new, whether that be nav data charts or company documents that have been updated from the admins on the account. I can very easily remove devices on the right hand side. If Chris lets me know, hey, my device broke getting out of the plane, I can't open it or use it, the device was stolen, whatever it may be, anytime there's a need to remove a device from using a license slot, you can do so easily by clicking the remove button, confirming that you want to remove it from the account, and then open that space up to log in on a new device to replace that spot. Below the device management is Jeppesen coverage. We'll get into this in more detail as we move down into the account section and talk about linking the Jeppesen accounts that you may have initially. But if you're managing multiple coverages from multiple tails with numerous site keys, you'll have the option here in this space to granularly assign what visibility this particular user has, right? So if I uncheck this box and save this change, this is limiting Chris's visibility of using these site keys from the linked Jep account. We'll talk more about that from a bigger perspective, linking the account and the global controls of visibility shortly. Lastly, we can come back to the top level where we can remove users if needed. And from there, let's take a look at the experience on the user end. So here as an admin, I've added users to the account. Chris, would you take us through what the end user will experience once they're added to a ForeFlight Business account?
Absolutely. This is something that drives a lot of questions and volume as far as when I add a user, then what happens? Because as an administrator, you're putting in names and emails and hitting, save, but then what happens on the other end? And it's pretty simple. The new user, the new pilot, new crew member will receive an automated email from ForeFlight saying that they've been added to your particular business account. And then from there, it'll have a link at the bottom, and all they need to do is click on that link and it'll redirect them to ForeFlight on the web, where they can then choose their own password. Once they've successfully chosen a new password, they'll get another automated email basically saying, "Welcome to ForeFlight." And from there, it's going to have a lot of useful information within the body of the email. Such things as the pilot's guide, videos, how-to videos, a way to get help from our fanatical pilot support team, and some other information like how to plan on the desktop and some more additional information that you're getting from this webinar, like how to manage your account. If you're an admin on the account, you'll also get an extra email letting you know that you've been selected as an admin, and some other options and features that are afforded to an admin on a ForeFlight multi-pilot business account. So pretty straightforward. If you don't happen to get any one of these emails, let us know. Write us to team@foreflight.com and we can help you get logged in.
And before we move on to the accounts section, just a few troubleshooting tips I'll go ahead and throw in, because I know Chris and myself both see them from time to time. If you're missing one of those welcome emails or the password email, they can get caught in spam, can be company firewall. It happens from time to time. So as Chris mentioned, reach out to support. There's a forgot my password button right at the login screen that will help set passwords as well. And as we showed, you can go into a user's view and help reset a password by editing the user's details directly as an admin. So with our organization managed, imagine we've gone through and added numerous users to fill out our license slots. Everyone's credentials are set up. Let's move down to the accounts section on the left-hand column. So the very last option, 2 below organization, where we've been working, you'll find either an option for account, or it will reference your first name if you have it specified as the user that's logged in. That's where I'm going to click and walk through a couple of important details here. So across the top, we have tab options, the first being account. This is where I manage myself as the logged in user, my details, right? I can update my name, email address, phone number, home airport, change password if needed as well. The next section is going to be referencing the subscription that we have set up. So if I ever need to remind myself of an expiration date, if I'm wanting to make changes, if I want to see, do I have credit on the account, or am I paying with a credit card that needs to be updated? All of that can be managed here under the subscription section. Clicking on upgrade or renew my subscription will take me through the buy workflow, so I can renew early, I can increase or decrease license needs at any time, but also you have an account executive that helps with that anytime via a quick call or email. Below that, we're going to have a transaction history that's running, showing all of the transactions that have happened since the inception of the account. This is a good place to reference receipts from transactions where they may be needed. You can add notes to any transaction. So I can see here, there's a note on this transaction to edit. And I could say, okay, for this April 17th transaction, this is when I added Chris to the account. Clicking view receipt will open up the receipt in the view for record, where you can print them or save them as PDF. Moving back up to our nav bar across the top, still within the account section, we're going to look at the third option for Jeppesen. We've already referenced needing to assign Jeppesen chart coverages to users of our team, but how do we get to that point? And that's going to happen by setting up a linked account through Jeppesen right here in this view. So we already have a linked account but those who don't will have a simpler view with an Add Jeppesen Account button right in the middle. It's going to give you the same workflow as if we added a second or third Jeppesen account, which is something that you can do if you're managing multiple on behalf of a flight department. If I hit Add Jeppesen, I'll be prompted for my Jeppesen account login credentials. I'll provide them here, hit Add, at which time the system will query that account and I'll see the account details. Here's the username provided at login. Here's the account number with Jeppesen. And then here are the Jeppesen coverages from the linked account. Many will have multiple. In this case, we just have a single line of coverage for our demo account here. But you'll see the details of the coverage. This is a JetView Worldwide coverage subscription. You'll see INDS references. You'll see JV Collins, ProLine 21 references, because as you get these site keys built to your Jeppesen account with various coverages for varying regions and varying avionics, you'll see those varying references to the coverage listed here. The account number is referenced again, along with the serial number for that row of coverage, how many site keys or seats are available to be installed at any given time, and if a tail number is associated with those site keys, it will be referenced here as well. Typically, every coverage that is purchased will have 4 site keys available. So again, it's very common to see multiple rows of coverage here. On the right-hand side, under the Allow Install column, this is going to work very similarly to how we can create visibility of these site keys for install on our team's mobile devices, but this is going to be a global management. So if I uncheck this box and save, no one that opens up their iPad to install JetCharts will be able to see this row of coverage as an option. One preference may be to start with everything deselected in this view, because that's the global default, and then go back into organization and on a per user level manage which users can see which coverage, making sure that site keys don't get confused between different teams and different tails. Moving down below the coverage references, we'll get to see a glimpse of who is installing a site key to access JetCharts on their mobile devices. So here we can see that on G's Mini 5, which is pulling the name directly from the device, Grady at FlightOps@ForeFlight.com has installed this coverage using one of these available site keys. Here's the reference to the matching serial number again, so we know that this device is using a site key and has worldwide JetCharts available. If there's confusion, someone installs from the wrong site key, or someone leaves the company, whatever the need is for management of these site keys, you can always remotely deactivate them from here. One point to make, this installed section is referencing only what is being installed in ForeFlight. If the soon-to-be sunset JetFD platform is still in use, some site keys may be missing, but not shown in this section. If you need a holistic view to chase down what might be installed outside of the ForeFlight ecosystem, scroll down just a bit further and go to my.jeppesen.com or my.jeppesen.com/BA, where you can manage a holistic list of the site keys as well, also remotely unhooking them. And before we move on to looking at the experience on the iPad of installing these site keys, it's fair to mention that if you don't have an existing Jeppesen account and you're in need of JetChart coverages, you can purchase those as part of your ForeFlight subscription, or you'll be able to contact Jeppesen Inside Sales for support in setting up an account and getting an account configured that we can then link via this method as well. Any questions on that, reach out to the sales team or support, and we'll get you set up. Chris, do you want to take us through the look at the end user experience, showing us once we have an account linked, We have site keys available for the team to install. How are they going to do that process?
Thanks, Grady. I just wanted to take a few minutes here to add some color and maybe go over some gotchas that I've seen in my experience with linked Jeppesen accounts. As Grady said earlier, what we're showing here is a linked Jeppesen coverage. In other words, you have reached out to Jeppesen directly. You have purchased seats or a coverage area and the necessary site keys, etc., that you would need for your flying needs. And what you're going to do here is you're going to essentially take an aggregate of all your different Jeppesen accounts and link them into one spot. That's really what we're doing here. And when you link your multiple accounts, and I don't know if Grady mentioned it earlier, you're actually able to link up to 6 different individual Jeppesen accounts and have all of the coverage areas for each one of those accounts show up here. Once they show up here, you'll be able to see, like you said, the coverage area. But one thing I really wanted to highlight was this seat concept. Now, really what this means is that it's how many devices that you want to run Jeppesen data on. So if your ForeFlight account has 50 devices, then you're going to need 50 seats for each one of those devices, right? So if you don't have enough devices, there's going to be some pilots that are going to try to go download Jeppesen data, and it will give you a warning saying that not enough seats remain. So just really wanted to make sure everyone understood what this seat concept was, right? Some other things that I wanted to go over was, what does it actually look like once this coverage is linked? What does it actually look like in the iPad? So we're going to go ahead and transition from my iPad and talk about what I call a 3-step process with a verification. So step number 1, we've already gone over. That's linking your Jeppesen business accounts into ForeFlight. Once that's done, we can then transition over to our iPads. And you're going to simply start by going to More, Jeppesen, and give it a second to load. Once it's done loading, you'll see that the linked Jeppesen accounts will show at the top. And then in the middle, you'll see where it says Install Coverage. So this is step 2. We're actually going to install the coverage by tapping Install Coverage. Now, if you have multiple coverage areas and the administrator has allowed you to see particular coverage areas, they're going to show up here for you to choose from. Now, for me today, it's pretty simple. I'm only allowed to see one coverage area because that's all we have in our test account here. So I'm simply going to tap the Install button. Once that's done, boom, instantly you will see the linked coverage that I've just tapped on. All right, so step 2 is complete. Now, before I move on to step 3, just to let you know, there are some other Jeppesen settings here, specifically being able to see a VFR theme. And if you're used to seeing the chart index numbers on approach plates, you can flip this toggle on and those will show while you're viewing Jeppesen approach plates. Very helpful. So moving on to step 3, we're going to move out of the Jeppesen tab and go to More, Downloads. Now, scrolling down a little bit, just below Content Packs, a new section has appeared called Jeppesen Charts. And I've already got mine started to download. My settings are set up to where I have automatic downloads. Once it senses a download is ready, and boom, it's already installed the en route charts, and the terminal charts are next. So that's the 3-step process to getting Jeppesen data into your iPads. And again, it's on each individual device. And so the last part is the verification that I mentioned. So to verify, I will tap away from the downloads, and I'll pick my favorite airport in the Airports tab. So choosing Austin Bergstrom here, I'll go to the Procedures tab. I usually like to go down to the Approach tab. And sure enough, you will see Jeppesen charts are in the primary position. Had we shown you this earlier, those would not have been there. It would have been the FAA version. Because if I scroll down here, you'll see that FAA is in the secondary position. So there you go. That is what it looks like to see your Jeppesen data from linking the coverage, downloading it, and verifying it's in your account. One last thing I'll mention is that every time you sign out of ForeFlight Mobile, that by default breaks the Jeppesen connection. In other words, if you're sitting at the FBO waiting for passengers to show up, and you decided that you were going to sign out of ForeFlight for some reason and sign back in, when you went to sign back in, it would be necessary for you to go ahead and do the 3-step process I just showed you and re-download the Jeppesen data. So that's caught a few pilots off guard. Like I said, waiting for your passengers to show up. Maybe you're at an FBO with some, spotty Wi-Fi, and next thing you know, you are short on time and short on download speed, and could end up, being in a real bind there, not having the Jeppesen data you need to go fly. So just wanted to point those things out. Those are some of the gotchas that I see typically in my day-to-day operations, and wanted to pass that along. Cool. Now that we've talked about Jeppesen, we can go ahead and move on into another integration, or the integrations tab. And so we'll move away from my iPad and go back to ForeFlight on the web. Clicking on the integrations tab here, you'll see that Jeppesen is listed again, and that's because technically Jeppesen is an integration. Well, we have done the same thing with some cloud document providers. We currently support connections with Amazon Web Services, also known as Amazon S3, Box, and Dropbox.com. I'm also excited to announce that after a lot of hard work from our documents team, we are going to be releasing the ability to link a Microsoft OneDrive account very soon. No more information on that right now, but you'll be seeing that from our marketing department really soon. So let's go ahead and talk about linking a cloud document service. Now, obviously, you're going to have to start by having an account with your particular provider. So let's pick on Dropbox for this example. You would need to go to Dropbox.com and sign up for their services. Now, we recommend that you sign up for a business account, and that's going to allow you all the file management, size, speed, rate limiting, all the different things that are going to be needed for moving a lot of data back and forth between the cloud and ForeFlight. So that being said, once your Dropbox account is established and you're able to create a link or a folder within Dropbox that will account for ForeFlight, you can then come in, and this won't say manage, this will say link here. You go ahead, and for the first time, you'll come in here and you'll hit the link button, and you'll put in the username and password for, in this case, like I said, Dropbox. And once you hit OK, it will automatically in the background link your Dropbox account to your ForeFlight account. Part of the process of linking that is also giving the catalog that you're going to be using a name. And in this case, we've given it a name of FlightOps. So this catalog name will be in the Documents tab here on the left, but it will also show up under the Documents tab in ForeFlight Mobile. So when dropping a file or folder into Dropbox, that's where you'll be able to go within ForeFlight and find that particular document. Also, it's important to note that there are some options that you have control over as an admin when linking a cloud document service. So down here you can see the ability to allow your users to email documents. So if a document is downloaded into ForeFlight Mobile, a user will then have permission, if this is clicked, to be able to email that document to someone else. Same thing goes with the ability to print documents. And then kind of on a different scale here, we're talking about the ability for your end users, your crew members, to have automatic downloads. So if a new document is placed into Dropbox, then ability for ForeFlight to automatically download that. And then if there's a content pack, and that is a subject that we would refer you to a webinar, we've done a recent webinar on content packs, but a really cool feature that ForeFlight offers to be able to disseminate large pieces of information, custom maps, custom charts, able to drop that into one file using Dropbox in this case, and have that particular file park itself and disseminate itself where it's supposed to go within ForeFlight Mobile. Very handy feature. So that being said, let's go ahead and walk over into the Documents tab. So clicking on Documents here, you will see the different drives that are here. Now, imported, just to go over this quickly, is simply documents that you maybe have used AirDrop or emailed to yourself, basically ones that you've imported on your own. But the documents that we're talking about right now are cloud documents via the FlightOps drive. Now, all the different folders that you see here are folders that were set up in Dropbox already. And so a Dropbox administrator who in theory should be a ForeFlight administrator, would choose a particular folder and then drop the file that they're looking to disseminate into that particular folder. It's also worth noting that if you have a empty folder within your Dropbox account, that empty folder will not actually translate over into ForeFlight Mobile. There's no data within that folder, so there's really nothing for ForeFlight to pick up on. And I've seen some emails wondering why particular users were not able to see a folder when there was really nothing in that folder. And that's just a good overview of how to link and manage a cloud document service within ForeFlight. Truly is a very powerful feature, and a lot of our corporate flight departments rely on this feature heavily. So if you need any more information about linking a cloud document service, you can reach out to team@foreflight.com, or you can reach out to the Success team. Awesome. So let's go ahead and move on to some other parts of the account. And we're just going to basically move over to the right one spot and talk about activity. Nothing too crazy here. I just wanted to show you that this exists. And what this is when a end user, a crew member that is on ForeFlight Mobile goes into the airports tab, there's a section to make comments. And any comments that your crew members make will then show up here in the airport comments. It's really just a way for you to kind of have an oversight of what's being said on behalf of your company while the pilots are out on the line. And then the last thing over here we'll talk about is settings. Now, earlier in the discussion, Grady was talking about how to manage the organization tab and the different users and their devices. Well, how was he able to see the different iOSs they were on and what the status of their documents were, what their downloads were? That's because the compliance switch was turned on here. So again, the compliance switch is essentially a way for administrators to have a bird's eye view of the different procedures, charts, documents that each individual user has on each individual device. It's a very handy tool, especially when you're operating under a 135 certificate. Time zone's pretty self-explanatory, so we'll move on into the briefing format. The two ones that we offer currently are a graphical HTML. I personally like this when this is an option. It's a series of web pages, and it really walks you through step by step with a lot of interactive content. However, if you are operating as a dispatch customer, you're only able to use the graphical PDF, which is still a very powerful format and briefing format. However, it's basically a function of the system and how dispatch works, especially with regards to our custom navlog. That's something we'll talk about later on in the webinar here. But here's how you would choose which ones you would like to see. Again, noting that dispatch is only going to be showing a graphical PDF. And then from here, we'll go ahead and hand it over to Grady, and he's going to walk us through JetFuelX.
Thanks, Chris. So before we get into one of the most critical pieces of setting up your business account, when Chris takes us through the aircraft section, let's take a quick stop here at the JetFuelX tab. So we've been working under account. Right above that is going to be JetFuelX. JetFuelX is a tool to aggregate contract fuel pricing. So as you can see here, we've done a little work to set up a few fuel vendors that in this business we have contract fuel pricing from. You would start with a blank slate. So let's begin with the option to add a fuel vendor, or what we refer to as a fuel card. That's going to be located here in the top right. When you go into adding a fuel card, you'll have a drop-down list of all of the fuel vendors that are an option to add fuel pricing from. For this example, let's use Everest. So once you select a vendor, it's going to be requesting various information. Every vendor that you select will have different options depending on what they need to verify your account and your status on their end. But if we go through and we put some details about our account, the last option here is going to be what aircraft from our fleet is going to be purchasing fuel with this card. You can select aircraft by aircraft, or if you just say every aircraft that we fly uses every fuel card, there's a select all button right here. You'll hit done, click add, and you'll see that a new card has been added to the view with a status of waiting on pricing. Every fuel vendor is going to deliver fuel price at a different time, at a different cadence. So initially, this is going to establish the relationship with the selected fuel vendor and get an initial pricing data set to populate what we see with these other cards, where prices have been updated on a certain date, how many prices at how many airports are available from each of these. And again, this view is specifically for account setup and management. If I need to come in and make a change, I can go into any vendor and hit edit to edit those credentials or details. Let's say Everest in this example, I'm setting it up today, but I got a price file manually, which would have historically been the way I've used the price data prior to JetFuelX. And so they're not going to update for another 6 days. I can manually import any existing price file by clicking on import, sending that file via email, or drag and drop right into the import file view. That will manually update the price data set that's available in ForeFlight, but you can also just wait until the automated delivery takes place. Again, some are daily, some are weekly. It varies from fuel vendor to fuel vendor. Once setup is done, the data set for the contract fuel pricing becomes visible and available to everyone on the team. So even though I may not be an admin and administrating this view to set these up, I can benefit as a user on the business account with you. So if I go and search for fuel as a pilot who potentially could be planning on my iPad or iPhone, I've looked up Houston Hobby out of Texas. I'm clicking on the FBO options that are there, and I can see the various FBOs, not only with retail fuel pricing, but you notice there's a third option for a JFX fuel price, which is going to reference my contract fuel. It's going to show at this level the cheapest option I have. If I click into any of the FBOs, I can see the details and if there are multiple vendors that have fuel options at that location. Tiered pricing is available. Any notes that are specified about a purchase will be available. So again, a short overview of the capability that you can get with JetFuelX. It's a great tool to manage. So from there, let's get into one of the core functions, which is aircraft setup and all the things that go into it. The aircraft being set up correctly, making them available for your team, is one of the core drivers of success with a ForeFlight account, keeping everyone in sync. Chris, can you take us there and walk us through that?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Grady. Yeah, like Grady mentioned, aircraft is super important to the ability to manage and use ForeFlight successfully. What I'm saying here is that the aircraft profiles are a foundation, a bedrock to the way that ForeFlight is able to then offer you many of the different features that you see. You know, just coming up with some examples: runway analysis, weight and balance, performance planning. These are all crucial parts that are part of the aircraft performance. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into what does it look like to start setting some of these up. So in the example here, you will see that we have 2 airplanes already built. And the first thing that jumps out is they're built under what's called an organizational aircraft tab. So that means an organizational aircraft is an aircraft profile that is built and managed by a ForeFlight administrator. And once the administrator builds the aircraft profiles to their satisfaction, they will come down and be able to hit what's called a publish button on the bottom right here. And once they hit the publish button, instantly that aircraft profile will be available for use on all the pilots on the account. It allows you to have control over the aircraft profile to make sure that your pilots aren't using their own individual profiles and getting a lot of different performance numbers out of it. Another thing I'll mention is that you are able to create what's called a personal aircraft. So if I go over here and click the new aircraft button, you'll see two options appear. And again, I'm an administrator on this account, so I'm going to see the new personal aircraft and the new organizational aircraft. If you were not an administrator, any aircraft added would be considered by default a personal aircraft.
Chris, and let me jump in and add, when you publish an aircraft for a team, if you have any add-on products like dispatch or runway analysis, they're going to be usable by everyone on the team because they are purchased and assigned to a TEL. This means that purchasing these products is at a fixed price, whether you have a 2-person account or 200. So it scales very nicely. You license that with your account executive against the TEL. Everyone on the team then gets access to use it when they select that TEL for planning a flight.
Awesome. Yeah, Grady. So let's kind of dive into that a little bit. So you can see here, we're going to go ahead and hit the new aircraft button and select new personal aircraft. Now, a couple things to mention, like Grady said. One is that any kind of extra licensing that you purchase, whether it be dispatch or runway analysis, those are going to be afforded to the organizational aircraft. So if I come in here and I have built maybe my own personal version of a organizational aircraft, I might get confused on what that looks like when I go to plan within ForeFlight. Yeah, so if I were to accidentally have built my own personal version of a company aircraft, right, I might go into plan within ForeFlight, be selecting the personal version of an organizational aircraft, and then next thing you know, I'm confused why runway analysis is not available, why the weight and balance is not working correctly. And ultimately, by going back into ForeFlight on the web here as a user, I can see that, oh, I have a tail number that matches one that already exists. So we do suggest that you do not have duplicate aircraft. And sometimes it happens, maybe you had that profile in your account before you joined the multi-pilot account. For whatever reason, just go ahead and take the time to audit the aircraft profiles in your account to make sure you don't have any duplicates. So that being said, why is there ability to have a personal aircraft? Because it might be allowed within your organization to use ForeFlight on your own time. So you might be a flight instructor, you might be a contract pilot, and if it's okay with your chief pilot for you to use ForeFlight on times outside of business hours, then you have the ability to build your own aircraft to do so. All right, so let's go ahead and let's run through some of the items to look for when building an organizational aircraft. Now, first and foremost, the tail number is pretty straightforward, right? Making sure you have the correct tail number in there. But then moving on to the serial number. Now, the serial number section is optional, as you can see, but it's really just a nice to have. It's nice to have because once you do assign runway analysis to a particular tail, you're then going to be prompted to choose what serial bank to choose from. A lot of manufacturers have different performance numbers based off of the serial bank that the aircraft was made under. Moving on over to the aircraft type, I chose the Phenom 100 for a particular reason. You can see that there are many different profiles that we offer for a Phenom 100. And what I'm trying to illustrate here is that you have to be very deliberate when you choose an aircraft performance profile within ForeFlight. We get the manufacturer data, we digitize that and put that data into code. And so this particular model that I'm choosing here, this type, is going to have a specific type of maximum takeoff weight, specific performance profiles, weight and balance, runway analysis, you name it. It's very, very important to choose the correct aircraft type. Later on, down towards the bottom of the aircraft profiles, I'll show you some of the warnings that you get when maybe you've accidentally chosen the wrong type and you go to manually try to change the maximum takeoff weight. If you use dispatch and utilize our EAPIS feature, you're going to want the CBP decal in there. Even though it's optional, it's really helpful to have that when you're doing dispatch EAPIS functions. All right. Coming down here, you're going to just see a little bit of some commerce information. And basically this is saying you might have dispatch purchased for this tail. You might have runway analysis, but it needs to be published in order for those license codes to be enabled. So let's go ahead and since we're thinking of it, let's go ahead and hit the publish button and hit OK. And now you can see that I have a trial set up here that ends at a certain date. But if you had a purchased version, it would say the same thing. Now, the cool thing about publishing the aircraft, once that's done, you'll see up here at the top, there's a banner. You do not need to unpublish to make any changes. Just simply come in here as an admin, make your changes, and you'll be good to go. All right. Sweet. So moving on into the performance section. One thing I will highlight here is that what you're seeing is manufacturer data. So we have agreements with the manufacturers. We get the data straight from them. We don't take any liberties. We don't make any changes to it. We put it in a digital form and we put it into the code of our product. So what you're seeing here are straight, true to form book numbers. Now we all know that when you're using the book to manage or to plan performance, especially for jets, it's really never ever book numbers. So what you can do here is after about maybe 3 or 4 or 5 flights, we suggest that you, during those 3 or 4 or 5 flights, that you take some pretty good notes on a nav log, being particular to pay attention to what were the time and fuel numbers you got in the climb, in the cruise, and the descent. Pay attention to, did you actually fly according to the performance numbers that you see here? Did you have it set up for a max speed cruise, etc.? Also taking into consideration, ATC, did they keep you up high? Did they keep you down low? Did they give you a shortcut? Basically, using common sense to take really good notes on that nav log, on those nav logs. And after it's all said and done, you'll be able to see trends. You'll be able to see where ForeFlight was planning with base performance numbers versus what you were getting in reality. Once you were able to come up with those numbers, you can then come in here and do what we call biasing. Biasing is done by simply clicking on the adjust button, and you'll just add or subtract time and fuel that you were able to come up with in your nav logs. You can use negative numbers for removing time and fuel and just straight positive numbers to add it. Okay? And you can do that for all 3 segments as far as climb, cruise, and descent. Now the cruise looks a little different. You'll actually see that there's a percentage bias here. And so think of the cruise adjustment, the speed adjustment, as a true airspeed adjustment. And you can think of the fuel flow as a gallon or a pounds per hour. If you want to see that bias across all the different profiles, you can go ahead and click this button down here and apply that bias on all cruise profiles. All right, and again, you can do the same thing for descent. One more thing I'll mention is that for the Phenom here, you see there's only one climb profile with the many cruise profiles and then one singular descent profile. Your aircraft might have more than one climb profile available. We do a really good job of putting in those extra or multiple climb profiles. However, if the one that you use is not included and it's an actual published manufacturer climb profile, let us know and we'll go ahead and have our performance team add that in there for you. One last thing about performance is you might encounter a scenario where the standard book numbers just don't work for your type of flight. An example of that is maybe doing a relocation flight, doing a low altitude, short nautical mile flight where you never actually get the jet up into the flight levels. To account for that performance, we allow you to build different basic profiles. Now, for a jet, I would suggest sticking with the by altitude profile. And if I click in here quickly, really what it's doing is allowing you to name the low and high fuel flows and then be able to give in some performance numbers both at a 0 per feet pressure altitude all the way up to the max ceiling. And of course, as you can see here, the more data that you can put into this spreadsheet, the more interpolation and the more accurate the numbers will be for this custom by altitude profile. Moving on, we do offer recall numbers in your flight plans. So that means that you would have a data link provider already established. We have 3 to choose from: Satcom Direct, Honeywell, and ARINC. So if that's already established with one of those providers, you simply come in here, choose your dating provider, and boom, you will instantly be able to see recall numbers on your nav log. Putting in a glide performance is simply allowing the glide advisor within ForeFlight Mobile to work. So if this is something you do not want to participate in, you don't have to. If you do know the glide numbers for your airplane, go ahead and put it in there. It's a pretty cool feature. Moving on, now the things that you're going to see here for the next few minutes are dispatch only. I'm not going to go into this too deeply other than to let you know that, like I said, these are dispatch only features, and if you'd like to know more about them, we do have dispatch webinars, and everything you see here is also in the dispatch user guide. Skipping down into altitudes, you can see that ForeFlight offers a default cruise altitude. In other words, when you're planning in ForeFlight Mobile, it's simply going to tuck in that number because you've told ForeFlight that's the number you'd like to see by default. And then from there, you can edit for the direction of flight and the performance. However, I do suggest from my day-to-day operations, I've seen simply making the default cruise altitude the same as the max ceiling will allow ForeFlight's performance engine to really come up with the best and most optimum altitude for your route and direction of flight. Awesome. Now, weights are pretty self-explanatory, so I don't need to go too much into that other than to let you know this is where you would want to pay close attention to the basic empty weight. So you're going to want to look on your weight and balance data sheet for your aircraft, get that number. This doesn't include any drink carts or any crew members or any bow weights. This is a true to form basic empty weight. And having this number accurate will allow you to have the optimum or the correct amount of fuel and passengers with respect to performance planning. So if this number is too high, in essence, you are cheating yourself of available fuel load and passenger and or cargo loads. You'll see basic empty weight again when we get into the weight and balance here in just a second. But that's for weight and balance purposes. What I'm talking about here is strictly for performance planning. Okay. One last thing about weights I mentioned earlier, that if you happen to have inadvertently chosen the wrong aircraft type, you might also see an incorrect max takeoff weight. So that's a clue. If I have the wrong takeoff weight in here, that's a clue for me to go back up into the aircraft type and maybe search for an aircraft type that is more appropriate for my takeoff weight. If you are searching and you do not see your particular model, you can go ahead and email us and we will get your request to the performance team. They will go ahead and build that performance profile for you. And as soon as they're done with it, they'll publish it and you'll then be able to use it in the app. All right, cool. Moving on into weight and balance. I'm not going to build a weight and balance for you today. Like many of the other features that you've seen, we have a webinar, we have videos, we have support articles and user guides that will help you. We also have, the support team, whether it be our pilot support team or success team, to help you with all of your individual and particular weight and balance profile needs. What I will show you here is some of the gotchas, or some of the features about weight and balance. First thing I would like to show is that you have the ability to build as many weight and balance profiles as you need. There's no limit. So our air ambulance operators, they particularly love this feature because on any given day, they could have different equipment, different configurations, and depending on the configuration for that day, they will just simply choose the appropriate weight and balance. Another thing I'll mention is that you're going to want to use a ForeFlight built weight and balance template for your jets. So many jets have fuel logic built into their weight and balance. In other words, the fuel goes into the airplane in a certain order and then it's burned through the engines in a certain order. So by choosing a ForeFlight built weight and balance template, that logic will automatically exist for your jet. We also have fuel moment tables built into our weight and balance profiles, and that can be a lot of work to do. And so we've taken all that work and done it for you. And so our weight and balance templates that are pre-configured are really useful and really helpful. Now the Phenom offers 4 different configurations. Don't get too hung up on that. All we're trying to do is save you a little bit of time. When it's all said and done, regardless of the configuration that you choose, you're going to make sure that every single station is accounted for, the appropriate weight, and any kind of limitations are plumbed into there. So simply just choose the configuration you think is closest to your actual aircraft and go from there. And then one last thing I'll share is the blank template is really not useful for jets. Due to the other things that I mentioned earlier, the fuel logic, the fuel moment tables, the blank template is really used for your basic piston airplanes. So if we don't offer a weight and balance template for your aircraft, you can use a blank template. Just let it be known if your aircraft uses any kind of fuel logic or fuel sequencing, you're going to want to stay away from the blank template. All right. All right. Some last things about weight and balance is, yes, you have the ability to delete this. If for any reason you wanted to simply purge the system of this particular weight and balance profile, you can do so. You have the ability to share it with other ForeFlight users. If you have, like I said earlier, if you wanted to use more than one weight and balance profile, instead of building it from a blank template, you can go ahead and just simply hit copy and then edit that copy to suit what your mission is. And then lastly, if you'd like to make edits to any existing weight and balance profile, simply click on the edit button here. Now I'm going to go ahead and drill into the edit button to just show you a few things to look out for. Let's start with the profile name. I suggest using a naming convention that allows you to show when this weight and balance profile was built. In other words, being very deliberate with the way you name the profiles will help you keep track of them to make sure you're using the most up-to-date weight and balance profile. Another thing to keep in mind is the empty weight. Now I showed you earlier that the empty weight was editable for the performance. Well, here it's also editable as far as your weight and balance. Now, why do we make it editable? Well, because you might want to curtail, or in other words, you might want to edit and slim down the basic empty weight to make it to where you can customize your weight and balance profiles and adhere to any kind of curtailment requirements. Now, if you have the empty weight and you start adding in bow weights, in other words, you were to include weights that always live in the aircraft, in this case, you're always going to have a pilot, right? So anytime you take an empty weight, you click in the bow weight and hit save, it will add that bow weight up here to the bow weight, the overall bow weight. And so you're basically getting a collection of all the different green check marks up here, letting you know this is what your operating weight is at any given moment. When you're planning a weight and balance that's nested in the flights tab, you can then add in your passengers and your cargo ad hoc. Very useful, very versatile. And one last thing I'll share about that is we are set to come out with a standard weights curtailment. We'll have more of that soon, but I just wanted to mention that we do have some exciting things coming to weight and balance. And lastly, to close this out, we do have some fuel management here. Again, you're going to see a lot more options because I'm a dispatch customer, but just a few that I'll point out is making sure you have the correct fuel type, the fuel units, and any kind of usable and or default reserve. These are really important steps to put in to make sure you're getting the correct performance planning with respect to fuel management in ForeFlight Mobile. Here's where you'll set up your filing codes to make sure that you have all the equipment and surveillance codes correct. And last but not least, making sure you have your dinghy and emergency equipment set up correctly, especially if you're going to be flying international. And with that, we've gone through all the different features and a lot of the gotchas and things to look out for when setting up aircraft performance profiles. And again, I will reiterate, it is super important to take your time, go through each one of these, and be very deliberate and be very exact and set it up to the best of your ability. And again, if you need help with this, you can always contact the pilot support team or Success for more help. We'll go ahead and toss it back to Grady. He's going to talk about some extra things you can put onto your ForeFlight multi-pilot account.
Thanks, Chris. Well done. Yeah, as Chris mentioned, we've really gone through today a focus on getting a business account operational so our crews for multi-users, multi-tail management can get off the ground and start flying, access to charts, fleet being organized. But there's so much more capability. ForeFlight's a very complex ecosystem with a lot of value out there. So get curious, ask questions, reach out to any of our team members at any time. A few of the add-ons that add value that I really want to touch on today are going to be first, ForeFlight Dispatch. We reference ForeFlight Dispatch a lot today. Dispatch is a product suite that caters to our business customers. You must be a business customer first before you would add this product on. And just to highlight a couple of the capabilities to really hone in on some operational needs that might fit for you, Dispatch is going to have an integration capability to make it end-to-end workflow that feels native. You're going to have a scheduling program up front that feeds into the ForeFlight ecosystem, building flights on your behalf, eliminating redundant data entry, and eliminating the possibility for errors in that process. You can also integrate SMS capabilities. You can also have an integration with trip support, where trip support can be leveraged and inject flight planning details or flight planning attachments that are supplementary to a flight directly into the ForeFlight ecosystem, rather than you receiving those by email, having to manually move them over into the ForeFlight suite. You also have the ability to do collaborative flight planning, right? So you're going to have potentially a coordinator or a planner or a director, chief pilot, someone who might be at an operational control center looking at flights from a desktop, a holistic view of everything that's going on for all users. You're going to be able to add PICs and SICs as you plan. So when those flights are pushed down to mobile, it's a singular flight that's being edited and managed with a change log to keep everything organized. And then there's just advanced capabilities that you can't get outside of Dispatch, like contingency planning for ETP, ETOPS, point of safe return, compliance for EASA and CASA built right in to make things easier when you're flying in those areas. The route builder that we have there is really advanced in comparison to what you can do on mobile, where you can build partial routings, put your own step climbs, do waypoint by waypoint altitude changes, fuel changes, any kind of complex routing capability that you may need. Dispatch has functionality to support that, and also EAPIS submissions, just to name a few of the power capabilities that come with Dispatch. Chris, any key features you want to touch on before we jump over to runway analysis, which is the next product line I wanted to talk about?
Absolutely, yeah. Take this opportunity to jump into some of the settings within Dispatch itself. So if you're on the Dispatch homepage, on the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a settings tab. And by clicking on that, you'll see 6 different setting solutions here with, like a generic planning setting. Really what I wanted to show here is that this is above and beyond the settings that you were already getting in ForeFlight. These are settings, obviously, that are specific to Dispatch. And because Dispatch is such a powerful tool and it's so versatile, and it's, like you said, it's really kind of the go-to for our business and our on-demand customers, this is where the power of Dispatch can be harnessed. In other words, if you have these settings configured the way that is what's needed for your operation, you can really get the maximum value out of Dispatch. One of the most powerful settings that I highlight about Dispatch is the ability for automation. In theory, you can have an API connection, in other words, an integration with a scheduling system. Flights can be built in that scheduling system and automatically pushed into Dispatch. Dispatch can then add some automations and optimizations, routing, etc. And then at a certain cadence can then automatically release that flight to the pilot's iPads, essentially having an automated, powerful, and very versatile planning solution that flows seamlessly from your scheduling integration all the way to the pilots without any intervention. And this is all because you're setting up the account correctly and you're setting up Dispatch correctly using these settings. A couple more highlights that I'll point out here. Operational rules. Think of these as the if this then that scenario. So if there are specific scenarios that you're always planning with, I'm sure there's an operational rule to handle that. So for example, let's say that when you're flying a certain tail number, you always have a certain call sign associated with that tail number. Well, you know what? We have an operational rule for that. If you always go to a certain alternate, when you go to a certain destination, we have an operational rule for that. So if you can really harness these settings, you're going to get the most power and the most value out of Dispatch. One last thing I'll mention is that we do have a custom navlog builder. Just like weight and balance, you can have as many custom navlogs as you wish. So a custom navlog for every scenario, every type of flying that you do. We do have an operational rule for that as well. So if you have a custom navlog that you would like to see for a particular flight, you can set up an operational rule to make that navlog show up in that flight. Very powerful features. Again, all the help you could ever need from webinars, pilot's guide, pilot support team, and success. We're all here to help you set up dispatch settings and get the most value out of this product. Grady, you want to talk about runway analysis?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Good points to highlight. I'll add operational rules. I like to say if you're having to tap more than once on multiple flight plans, it should be an operational rule, right? Save yourself time, save yourself taps, save yourself money. Talking about runway analysis, everybody is familiar with the procedure of doing runway performance calculations. Our product will speak for itself. We have engine out procedures, multiple options for alternate procedures, capability and support for numerous aircraft. So I'll leave it at that. If either of these products are an interest for you or your operation, please contact our sales team. We can schedule time to go through and discuss Q&A, set up demos, and then once you're familiar enough to put it in your own hands, we'll set you up with a complimentary trial as well, as long as you have the foundation of the business account, which is necessary to set this up for a team. So that covers our topics for today. Thank you everyone for listening. Jay, I'll hand it back to you. Thanks for your time, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Before we get to your questions, I want to point out a few useful links for you. And don't worry about copying these down. I've put these and all of the other links and resources that Chris and Grady mentioned during today's presentation in an email that you'll receive later today. First, ForeFlight.com/business is where you can learn more about everything offered in ForeFlight for Business, including many things we didn't have time to cover today. Second, check out ForeFlight.com/webinars. There you can watch some of our past webinars, including those on dispatch, runway analysis, and much more. That's also where the video from this webinar will be posted in the next 24 hours. You can also register for other webinars we have coming up there as well. And lastly, Chris and Grady mentioned several times to reach out to their teams if you have any questions. So you can reach Grady and the sales team at sales@foreflight.com. And you can reach Chris, the rest of our success team, as well as our support team by emailing team@foreflight.com. With that, let's move on to some of your questions. And thanks for all the questions you have sent to us today. We look forward to getting to a few of them here. Let's see. Grady, the first one I have is for you. Could you explain how flight sharing is different than creating a flight in dispatch?
Hey, absolutely, Jay. Thanks for the question. So let's talk about first flight sharing between mobile devices and users. So you're going to be able to send flights between devices, whether you're on an account together or not. So let's say I'm flying with someone who has ForeFlight. We're not even on a business account together. I can create a flight plan, share that flight plan with the other ForeFlight user. They would have visibility of the flight that I've created, but it would be read-only for them. They could not edit it. I can also continue to make updates to the flight on my device with my account. Those changes get synced as long as there's an internet connection. That is essentially how the flight sharing will work, mobile to mobile, even within a business account. So users that are on a business account without dispatch would share in the same fashion. Essentially think of it as there's one owner of the flight. You can share that out for visibility among a group, but only one owner and editor, which is the person who built it initially. In dispatch, you're going to be able to create a centralized and shared flight plan where you do crew assignment. Once that inception of the flight is made, every crew member or involved party in the planning process would be able to manipulate simultaneously a flight. There would be a change log showing a change history of who changed what was the change before and after, made by who, with a timestamp. So it's more of a collaboration of a collective group that's doing planning together versus a single planner just sharing the work they've done with others. Hopefully that covers the question.
Definitely. Thanks, Grady. Chris, the next question I have for you is for you. I'd like to know how documents can be shared among pilots on the flight deck.
Yeah, thanks for that question. Pretty straightforward question and answer here, and it really just depends on where that document lives. Documents can be found all over ForeFlight Mobile, whether it be nested in the flights files on the flights tab or in the documents tab itself. Wherever you find the document, it's pretty simple. You simply find what we call the Send To button. And the Send To button is simply a square with an arrow pointing up out of it. And when you tap that button, you then get to choose what type of medium you would like to send this document with. So it's excuse me. So if I'm in the documents tab and I go to my imported drive and I have a file in there, I can open up the file, tap the square with an arrow coming out of it, and you'll see there's two options, in this case, flights and print. Well, a little kind of pro tip here is if you tap on print, you will then be able to not only print, but the Send To button is exposed. And so by tapping on that Send To button, I can then choose, am I gonna airdrop it? So if I'm in flight and I'm next to my co-pilot and we both have Bluetooth enabled, I can airdrop it. If we're on the same Wi-Fi network, right? If we're connected to a Sentry, if we're connected to onboard Wi-Fi, I can use that onboard Wi-Fi to send it via email, or I can text message it. Many different ways that you can share the document. So just to summarize, find where that Send To button is and tap that and choose which way you want to do it. Now, piggybacking off what Grady said earlier about dispatch, the cool thing about that is if you are both, or you are a named crew member on a dispatch flight, whoever created that dispatch flight can drop files in the files section, and it will automatically show up into the flight itself under the flights file. So a way of kind of circumventing the need to share documents. But either way, pretty simple, straightforward, the Send To button and go from there.
Definitely. The Send To button is probably one of the most useful things across ForeFlight. Grady, the next question I have is for you. How many devices can I have for each seat? And what this person is looking for is 2 iPads for each pilot so they can have a backup. And I don't know if this is related to Jeppesen charts or ForeFlight licenses. So could you clear that up a little bit?
Absolutely, yeah. I'll cover both just to make sure there's good understanding across the group here. So let's start with ForeFlight licensing. And we talked about building a team, adding users to our organization. Every user that we add to our organization, we're going to be looking at adding them and them having the ability to log in on 2 devices of choice. That is the default model for business accounts. And so you would have every user with the option of 2 iPads, 2 iPhones, or 1 of each. That would be their limit. No user would be able to access a 3rd device, but essentially the ForeFlight license would be covering 2 devices across the team. So if you have 5 users, you're looking at 10 devices in total. So there's flexibility there to meet that need. Then you also have your linked Jeppesen services. So Jeppesen services reference seats or site keys. And so when you're talking about a Jeppesen package that has an availability of site keys or seats, those being installed on a device are 1-to-1. So let's take that example of I'm a ForeFlight user and I have a primary iPad and a backup iPad. I would actually need 2 Jeppesen site keys to cover both of my devices. What I see most common is using a primary and a backup device with ForeFlight, using a Jeppesen site key on the primary device only, with then maybe the fallback of the government charts on the backup device as needed, or the phone is more for weather spot checks and things of that nature. Yeah, that's the way it'll work between both services.
Great. Thanks, Grady. Chris, the next question I have is for you. How can I find the Jeppesen en route manuals in ForeFlight?
Great question. Jeppesen en route manuals are automatically inputted or placed into the Documents tab of ForeFlight Mobile once you have successfully done the steps I lined out earlier of linking and downloading your Jeppesen coverage. So once that Jeppesen coverage is chosen within the More Jeppesen tab and you've downloaded it, just simply navigate over into the Documents tab and you will see a Jeppesen drive has appeared. And all the Jeppesen manuals that correlate with your coverage area should all be there for you to use.
Awesome. And last question I have is for Grady. When using JetFuelX, do you have to update the vendor information per the airport or FBO you go to, or do you set it up once and it applies to all FBOs where that contract is available?
Yeah, good question. So every vendor that you set up as an integration with JetFuelX, it's going to cover every service location for that vendor. So if that vendor services, let's say 275 airport FBO combo locations, when they send out the price file giving their updated pricing for the mutual customer, every location will be updated in one sweep. So there's not any kind of manual management to keep those up to date. It's all going to be automated once the link between the vendor and ForeFlight has been established. So whether it be 50 locations, whether it be 5,000 locations, that vendor will send the updated price file on a daily, hourly, weekly basis, whatever it may be, because it varies from vendor to vendor. And then every location within ForeFlight will update once that data package has been received, all in one sweep.
Great. Thanks, Grady. That's all the questions we have for today. Just before we go, I want to point out these links one more time here on this slide. I still see questions coming in. So if you didn't get your question answered today, please reach out to team@foreflight.com and we will get those answered for you. The video from this webinar will be posted at foreflight.com/webinars in the next 24 hours. So if you'd like to share it with any of your colleagues, you can do that. And again, all the links and resources that Chris and Grady mentioned during today's webinar are going to be sent in an email that you'll receive in about an hour. So with that, thanks so much for coming, and we'll see you on the next webinar.